I came to faith in a holy roller Pentecostal church. And in that kind of thing, you whoop, whoop, right? In that kind of a world and an environment, I was sort of taught, and I don't know if it was explicit, but it was certainly implied, that the Christian life was one of always upward and onward, getting better all the time, happier and more joyful. If you got saved, it was nothing but sunshine and roses the whole way. And if that wasn't happening for you, you probably need to get resaved. And so I thought the Christian life looked like this. Yes, you come to Christ, you go from the darkness and you go from death to life. You make the journey, you don't know anything about God, you suddenly discover God, and you're moving from darkness into the light, and then forever on you live in the light. And it looks like this. It's like ever onward, ever upward into deeper, higher, better things, always going on. More glory, more moving forward. That's what I was taught the Christian life was like. And as years went by, I began to more like this. It's sort of a up and then a down. And then an up, and then a down, and then up and doing good, and then something happened. And periodically in life, what would happen is crisis would come. And then I felt like the Christian life looked a lot more like this, where you are actually not living in glory, you're living in shades of gray. Sometimes light, sometimes dark, sort of the misty ground of not quite in where God wants you, in this in-between zone where it's like, I know I'm with God, but it isn't the glorious light. I've got these shades of gray that are happening, and I'm going on, and sometimes crisis happens, and you just flatline, sometimes for years on end. And you go your own way, and you figure yourself in isolation, and you want to go up higher, you want to move forward with God, but sometimes do, or how to do it. You get stuck in this place where it just feels like you're living a Christian life in shades of gray. Am I the only one who want to know? Okay. All right. I'm hearing that from other people think, hey, if you haven't experienced this yet because you're new to Christianity, you probably will. And I want you to know that actually this is pretty common in life. And what will happen to many people is in the shades of gray zone where crisis has come and you don't quite know what to do, there are usually two very strong responses. One response is to give up, quit, and just walk away. And the other response is to, no matter what, I am going to hang on to God. I'm going to hold on to Him. I'm going to press in. I'm going to yell at God. I'm going to get mad at Him. I am not going to let God go until He gives me an answer for why life is like this. Most people I've seen do the walk away. Those who you know who are spiritual giants who've hung in there and their faith is still strong after years are people who said, oh no, there were times I didn't know what God was doing or why He was doing it, and I was raging angry at Him, but I wouldn't let Him go. And I held on to God. I want to talk about a story that we can hear about a man who was one of the great patriarchs of the faith, a forerunner, who would not let go of God until God blessed him. And his life up to that point had not been rosy, and yet God was always on his life. It's the story of Jacob, a famous story in the Old Testament where Jacob wrestles the angel who is actually God Himself. From now through Easter, I'm going to be doing a series of just kind of random stories out of the Old Testament, learning from these ancient lessons of faith from these people and picking different ones, sometimes in order, sometimes out of order, but learning from these ancient people the wisdom of how they held on in their faith, Bible stories that would encourage and strengthen us. So if you've got a Bible, turn to Genesis chapter 32. If you don't have a Bible, how lucky you are that we've got Bibles all over the room for you that look just like this. They're on the tables, they're on the rows of chairs. Grab your Bible, open to Genesis chapter 32, and we're going to read the story where the great patriarch Jacob wrestles God. And before I get too far into this, let's just back up a moment and just sort of, for those of you who are unfamiliar with this Jacob character, let me give you some backstory on him. So Jacob is this young man. He's born a twin. He's a fraternal twin, and he's born into the promised line of Abraham, Isaac, and then these two twins, Jacob and Esau, are born. And they're fraternal, and the one brother, his older, slightly older, like 30-second older brother, he comes out all red and hairy and big and strong, and so his name is called Esau, which is a play on Hebrew words, because the word Esau kind of has a connotation of both red and hairy. And so he comes out like this. He's born like this, I don't know, like this little orangutan or something, right? And you're like, whoa, I'm sure both mom and dad looked at him like, that must be from your side of the family, right? And he comes out all kind of red and hairy, so they name him Esau, which kind of means red and hairy, a play on these words. And then literally hanging onto his heel is born the second brother they named Jacob. And Jacob means guy who holds onto the heel, guy grabbing the foot, guy grabbing the heel. That's what his name actually means. So these two twins are born right off the bat. Now, in their culture, the oldest firstborn son is the one who will inherit the family wealth, the family power, will become the leader of the family, will become the one who inherits what they call the birthright, which means you're the one who is looked at to be both as guardian of the family, priest of the family, leader of the family, the whole clan. And in this case, this is not just a single family, because Isaac is inheriting everything from Abraham, and there's hundreds of soldiers that are with them. There are other families responsible for them. There's a lot of different services. So to be born with the birthright means you're inheriting not only just whatever dad owned, but just the responsibility of all these people. And Esau, the oldest hairy orangutan brother, doesn't care about the birthright. He's a wild guy. He loves going out. He is an athlete. So he goes out, he hunts, he's out in the woods all the time. He is a man's man, and dad loves him because he's like everything dad wants in his son. Bold, courageous, warrior, out hunting, out doing stuff all the time, bringing home game and venison. And so dad thinks he's like the star athlete. Oh, look at my son, the quarterback of the football team. He's got that vibe about him. And the other twin, the other fraternal twin, is just he looks different. Has a different vibe to him. And mom likes him better. He kind of hangs out in the tents. He can do a lot of stuff. He's smart. He's capable. He gets things done. But he likes to make sure that the family's covered and that kind of thing, that everybody does well. He really looks out for the family. And there comes a point when old dad, Isaac, is dying. And he's very old. He's very sick. He's so old that he's blind. And Esau is supposed to come in and get the blessing. The blessing is the inheritance. It is a time when you come in, dad lays his hands on you, he blesses you and bestows upon you the birthright of leadership, the spiritual legacy of Abraham, the understanding of who God is, the presence, the power of God, the majority of the wealth, all the responsibility of the family. He's supposed to get the birthright. And he says, okay, Esau, I want to give you the birthright. Since he's blind, you go out, hunt something, bring me back some game, and when you give me the game, then I'll give you the birthright after you make me my favorite meal. Off Esau goes. Meanwhile, mom grabs Jacob and says, Jacob, hey, you're going to lose out on everything if we don't do something now. So while Esau's out hunting, I'm going to kill a goat. I'll prepare it, and I know exactly how my husband likes it. I'll prepare it that way. He won't know the difference. You go get dressed up in one of your brother's gowns and go wrap your arms and your neck in goat skins. And so you go in and pretend to be your brother because dad's blind anyway and he doesn't know. And so that's exactly what Jacob does. He goes in to literally steal the birthright, to steal the blessing of his father. He's taking the right of the firstborn that he doesn't deserve. And mom is putting him up to it. And so he goes in, and everything transpires. At first, dad's like, you sound like Jacob, but you smell like Esau. Come over here and give me a kiss. Right? And so because he's wearing Esau's clothes, oh, you smell like the fields, which is like, I don't think that's a great fragrance. But evidently Isaac liked it. And so he comes in close, he grabs him by the arm, he feels that he's hairy, and boom, he gives him the blessing. No sooner is he done blessing him than Esau comes in and says, okay, Dad, I'm ready for the blessing. He goes, what do you mean? I just gave it to you. And all hell breaks loose. And Esau makes a quote. He basically says, as soon as Dad dies, I'm going to kill my twin brother Jacob for what he's done. Mom has to pull Jacob aside and say, maybe you should get out of here for a while, lay low till things calm down. So go up, my firstborn son Esau, he's taking wives from the Hittites, he's taking Canaanite wives, they bring their pagan ways, I don't like them, they're wild, they're rowdy, they're carousing, they bring in their pagan ways, they don't belong in our family, and Esau keeps marrying these pagan wives, he's adding to his collection multiple wives. So you go, and you head up to my uncle, you go up there to my uncle's place, and you find a wife from among our own people, one who believe in the one true God. And so Jacob sets out to save his own life. He sets out and he leaves Beersheba and heads up to Padam Aram. Now, I think I have a slide. Yeah. So they're way down in Beersheba, south of the Dead Sea. And they head up all the way through Gilead, through the mountains, across the Sea of Galilee, miles and miles, way up to Padam Aram. So they're a long way from home. On his way out of the area, he has an experience where he goes to sleep one night and he has this dream of angels coming down a giant ladder or staircase coming to earth and going back up and coming to earth and going back up, and he realizes he's in a special spot. He sets up a little altar there and calls it Bethel, house of God. And he basically prays a prayer that says, oh, this is where God is, because it's a special place on earth, because I was camping here and I saw angels in my dreams, and so this is the house of God spot. And he prays, God, if you will protect me, and you'll take care of me, and you'll provide clothing for me, and you'll provide food for me on this journey while I'm going north, then I'll worship you. Right? That's his deal. And so off he goes. Like, you could tell that very prayer, he's like, he does not plan to be gone long, because all he prays for is food and clothing to sustain him through this journey. He's going to head up there. He's thinking, I'll be probably gone a couple weeks, get myself a girl, come back home. Hopefully my brother will be calmed down. All will be well. He won't come back for 20 years. He gets up there, falls in love with one of his distant cousins, and her name is Rachel. Ooh, she's a beaut. She's got an older sister named Leah. Not so pretty. Her name means weak eyes, and we don't know if that means weak on the eyes or she had weak eyes and couldn't see. I'm going to go with weak on the eyes. So that's what her name actually means. So he gets up there, and he has to make a deal. Now, in their culture, you're supposed to bring a dowry. You want a young girl for your wife, then you bring dad something good. You bring wealth, you bring power, you bring camels, you bring goats, you bring some sort of dowry so that you can marry one of his daughters, which is, I think, is a custom we should have returned to, me having 4 daughters. Sounds like a good plan for me, right? So Jacob's got nothing. He had left with nothing but like a staff in his hand. He was just going to, so now it's like, now what do I do say? He negotiates this deal where he says, I'll tell you what, Laban, I will work for you for 7 years to marry your daughter Rachel. They strike the deal, off they go. For 7 years he works, dates this girl. I'm guessing she's probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 14 or 15 when he meets her. That would have been common in that culture. So now about the time she's 21, 7 years later, they get married. And on the wedding night, unbeknownst to Jacob, Rachel is held away. She is confined and not able to get out. And since they wore all sorts of veils and that kind of thing, they dress up old weak eyes, Leah, and they have him marry her. And so he ends up with Leah, wakes up the next morning, and I don't think the veils came off till the morning. He's like, oh my God, I got the wrong girl, right? Goes out, he's furious at Laban. Laban gives him the old, hey, you can't marry off the younger daughter till you've married off the older daughter. Everybody knows that. So I've given you the older daughter. I mean, it's a cheat, it's a scam, it's a lie. And you see something kind of a pattern that's developing in Jacob's life. He was a cheat, a lie, and a scammer on his brother, his mom, and his dad, and now it's happening to him. And so they strike a deal, and it's like, okay, then I'll work another 7 years for Rachel. Since I've already worked 7 years and you cheated me, I'll keep Leah, and I'll work another 7 years and I'll have Rachel. So he ends up with these 2 wives. And they start, Leah has kids. She pops out 4 kids right away. Boom, bam, right? And Rachel has no kids. Not having kids is a huge deal. Because if you're a woman and you don't have children, there will be nobody to take care of you in your old age. There's no social security system. There's no government going to take care of you. You'll end up widowed. You will end up with nothing. You will end up destitute. In your old age, the only hope you have is that you will have sons who will provide for you and take you in and keep you going in your old age. It's a huge deal to not have kids. It meant your old age you would suffer. And so in the desperation of not having any kids after several years had gone by, she has a servant girl. And so customary, if you didn't have kids, is you could use one of your slave girls to have kids on behalf of you, and that kid would sort of become yours. And so she offers her slave girl to Jacob, saying, have children through her so that I'll be taken care of. And actually for the slave girl, it would elevate her status up to a wife level. So actually it was a huge deal for them because their status got elevated too. So he takes on one of the slave girls, and then he has a couple kids through her. Well, then Leah sees this and goes, dang it, I've stopped having kids. I've only had 4, and I've got a slave girl too, so use my slave girl as well. So before it's all said and done, now he ends up with 4 wives and 11 sons and a daughter. And now he's got all this family, but he actually doesn't own anything. 14 years he's worked. And in 14 years, this is what he has. But he doesn't own anything because he's done all of his labor to get the wives. And so he makes another deal to say, for 6 more years, I will work for you, Laban, but what will my wages be? And they are herders, they're shepherds. So the wages will be, Laban thinks about it, he goes, okay, So every goat that's born, I can't remember the exact order, but every goat that's born speckled you can have, and every sheep that's born black you can have, which is like 1 in 10. 1 in 10 he gets. So Jacob's like, deal, I'll take the deal. And then what he does is he does selective breeding when Laban's not working and makes sure that only those are the ones that get born. And halfway through the deal, Jacob changes it and says, or Laban changes and says, okay, wait, too many black sheep and too many striped goats, so now we're going to reverse it. Because all these sheep are now black and all these goats, we're going to reverse the deal. And so they go back and Jacob goes out in the woods and he reverses the selective breeding thing. So every time he does this sort of stuff, he prospers, Laban goes down, and Jacob prospers, but you can see the whole thing is sort of a dishonest con, right? And then 20 years have now gone by. 7 years for one wife, 7 years for the next one, 6 years for his goats and herds, and it's time to go. At the end of the 6th year, Laban doesn't want to let him go. Because Laban says, I've been blessed and I've grown rich because your God is with you. And because your God is with you and I'm hanging out with you, I'm being blessed because I see your God working for you. So in the dead of night, he has to pack up his family, take his flocks and herds, skedaddle out of there, and he gets about a 3-day head start, and he heads all the way down back towards where he's going, is back down towards Beersheba, and he's in the mountains of Gilead when Laban catches up with him with an army. And Laban is furious. He's like, these flocks are mine, these children are mine, these daughters are mine, how dare you take away from my family? And they're going to have this big to-do, they're going to have it out. And he said, because you've stolen my household gods to boot. We have all these little idols, these little clay and wooden idols that were in the household, good luck charms that they would pray to. And somebody in the entourage has stolen the idols. And nobody knows it. We will find out from the Bible. It was Rachel. Rachel had stolen all the household gods, which goes to show Leah was the one who really believed in God and followed him. Rachel, not so much. And so Laban goes through all the tents looking for him. She's sitting on a camel saddle, and the household gods are under the camel saddle. He comes into her tent, and she's like, well, excuse me, Dad, but the way of women is upon me, meaning she's having her period. So I'd get up, but I can't. So she just sits on top of the household gods. He searches, he can't find them, right? And so he comes out, and then Jacob gets furious. Like, how dare you? How dare you accuse me of that? They have sort of this big blow-up, sort of an argument and a fight, and so they end up deciding that they will set up a little meal with each other. They'll have a meal because meals mean peace, and then they set up a monument, and the monument becomes a boundary that says, you will never cross this boundary to do me harm, and I will never cross this boundary to do you harm. Here it is. And so they sort of are having this non-aggression peace treaty. Laban goes home, and Jacob starts moving his family to come back to his homeland, the promised land, the territory. And this is where things pick up in Genesis 32. And it says, so Jacob went on his way, and the angels of God met him. And when Jacob saw them, he said, this is God. And he called the name of the place Mahanaim. And so that's on the Jabbok River. Mahanaim is this little area where the Jabbok flows sort of east and west, and he's going to cross that river before he crosses the Jordan. He's coming way out, he saw angels, and now on his way back, he sees a whole camp, a whole troop of angels. And so he names the place 2 camps, or double camp, meaning my camp, humans, and the other camp of angels are in this place. So he names it Mahanaim, and there he sets up for the night, and he's going to stay there and remain there because it's holy, it's sacred ground, something's going on. He's coming back into the promised land. And Jacob sent messengers before him to Esau, his brother, in the land of Seir, the country of Edom. And he commanded them, saying, speak thus to my lord Esau. Thus your servant Jacob says, I have dwelt with Laban and stayed there until now. I have oxen, donkeys, flocks, and male and female servants, and I have sent to tell my lord that I may find favor in your sight. So he's going to send an entourage down to meet up with his brother Esau, who's now leader of the family, because by now, 20 years later, by now, old dad probably dead. And so I better send some sort of entourage to Esau and see if there's peace between us now after all of this time. And then the messengers returned to Jacob, saying, we came to your brother Esau, and he also is coming to meet you, and 400 men are with him. Why would he need 400 men? 400 men to meet me and say hi? Give me a blessing, have a party, eat a little cake together? Probably not. You only bring 400 men if you're bringing an army to kill us all. You still hate me after all this time. 20 years ago, you hate me still so much you're bringing 400 men to kill me. And he starts to hatch a plan. And so his plan is this. He said, if Esau comes to the one company and attacks it, then the other company which is left will escape. So he divides all of his family into two different groups, right? 2 wives, you take you and your kids over there. You 2 wives, take you and your kids, you go over there. You get this many goats and camels and donkeys, and you get this many, and you guys, you and you go protect them. You guys go protect them. And you guys be far enough apart that whichever camp gets attacked, the other one has a chance to get away. That's his plan. And so now he thinks about, now what do I do? And Jacob goes and he kneels down and he prays. He says, and check this prayer out. O God of my father Abraham, and God of my father Isaac, the Lord who said to me, return to your country and to your family, and I will deal well with you. I am not worthy of the least of all the mercies and of all the truth which you have shown your servant. For I crossed over this Jordan with my staff, and now I have become 2 companies. Deliver me, I pray, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him, lest he come and attack me and the mother with the children. For you said, I will surely treat you well and make your descendants as the sand of the seas, which cannot be numbered for multitude. So he lodged there that same night, and he took what came to his hand as a present for Esau, his brother. So here's his prayer. First off, notice, who's he praying to? He's praying to the God of his grandpa and the God of his dad. Not yet his God. Oh, he knows about him. He's been raised in the tradition of God. He knows the truths of God. They don't have a Bible yet, but they have the stories. He knows all the stories coming all the way down, and he's sort of been in and around everything of the faith, but the faith really belonged to grandpa and it belonged to dad, and I've sort of dabbled in it along the way, and there's certain times God helped me, and other times I forgot about him, and usually when it came to life, I did it myself, though, God, thank you very much. I did it my way on my terms, and I learned how to deal with people the way I knew how. And I took care of my own business because, God, you weren't there. But now I'm going to be killed. And it's a crisis moment. And in the crisis moment, he finally says something that up to now, in his whole story we've not seen, he shows a little humility. And he says, I need your help, God, and I know I don't deserve it. I mean, he knows how he's been. He knows how he's acted. He not only was a bit of a cheat and a liar and a manipulator, but also he got cheated, lied, manipulated too. He knew that this is how the world works. You got to figure out how to get one up on the other guy before he gets one up on you. And everybody's trying to shaft the other guy all the time. And so you better be ahead of them by one step. That is the way he has lived his life. And relationships got broken for it. He lost his relationship with his mom. He lost his relationship with his dad. He lost his relationship with his twin brother. He's up there with Laban. He and Laban are now enemies who have to have a non-aggression pact. There's a lot of conflict with these 4 wives, so you'd think that'd be peaceful. Not so much, turns out, after all. Go figure. And that's not very peaceful, and everything is how to get ahead. And so he sets out one last time. He's got one more trick up his sleeve. And here's his trick. It says, so he lodged there that same night and took what came to his hand as a present for Esau, his brother. 200 female goats and 20 male goats, 200 ewes and 20 rams, 30 milk camels with their colts, 40 cows and 10 bulls, 20 female donkeys and 10 foals. And then he delivered them to the hand of his servants, every drove by itself. And he said to his servants, pass over before me and put some distance between successive droves. And he commanded the first one, saying, when Esau, my brother, meets you and asks you, saying, to whom do you belong, and where are you going, and who are these in front of you, then you shall say, they are your servant Jacob's. It is a present. Sent to my lord Esau. And behold, he also is behind us. And so he commanded the second, the third, and all who followed the drove, saying, in this manner you shall speak to Esau when you find him. And also say, behold, your servant Jacob is behind us. For he said, I will appease him with the presence that goes before me, and afterward I will see his face. Perhaps he will accept me. So the present went out over before him, but he himself lodged that night in the camp. He puts together these little flocks and herds, and you're talking 20 sheep and 200 sheep and 20 rams, right? So these rams can breed all those sheep, and he's giving him a huge business. He's giving him this whole business. He's like, This is in wealth beyond compare. These 200 goats alone, these 200 sheep alone, they are an entire business. And he says, put them into some distance. So the first group goes out and put about a half mile back to the next group and a half mile back to the next. And as they're going, when these 400 men come upon you and they ask you, whoa, 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 who do you belong to and whose sheep are these? You tell them they're a present for Esau from Jacob. And Jacob is on his way and he's way back there following. And if the first isn't enough, the second group should be enough. And then by the third group or the fourth group, by the time he gets to the end, he's going to be like, whoa, I'm a rich man because of Jacob. Maybe Jacob's not so bad after all. Maybe I won't kill him. Maybe I'll spare his life because look at all the stuff he's given me. Oh, and by the way, look how rich Jacob is, that he can spare 580 of his flocks and herds and still got plenty for himself. He is a rich man by now. He has gotten filthy rich on his ways. And so he sends these herds ahead, and he keeps his family behind. And it says, and then we pick up the story. It says, now he sent it, and we'll spend the night here. So he and the family are spending the night. All the flocks he's going to give as gifts are ahead. He's got his own flock with him. And it says in verse 22, and he arose that night and took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and his 11 sons, and crossed over the ford Jabbok is how you might say it in English. He took them and sent them over the brook and sent over what he had. And then Jacob was left alone. All right, so he takes what he has. He goes has everybody cross the river. Everybody, you go on the other side, divided into 2 camps. The presents are going ahead of you. Hopefully, the presents are enough manipulation that I can appease Esau. And by the time he gets here, his anger will be assuaged, and he won't kill me because I've given him all these gifts, and he'll feel really bad killing me and taking the presents at the same time. And so that's his plan. He puts the 2 camps in groups, and he is left all by himself back on the original side of the river. That's where he is. He's now all alone. His family's gone. His flocks are gone. His herds are gone. Everything is ahead of him, and he's afraid that everything he has is going to be lost by being killed, by being assassinated by Esau, and he will be killed, his children will be killed, his wives will be killed, and everything's going to go to Esau. That's what he's afraid of. And so in that night, it says in verse 24, then Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until the breaking of day. Now when he saw that he did not prevail against him, he touched the socket of his hip, and the socket of Jacob's hip was out of joint as he wrestled with him. And he said, let me go, for the day breaks. But he said, I will not let you go unless you bless me. So he said to him, what is your name? And he said, Jacob. So let's unpack this little moment right here. It's very crazy. I won't let you go until you bless me. Jacob, his whole life, has been looking for something from God. He's been looking for God's favor. He's been looking for God's hand. He's been looking for God's prosperity. He's been looking for God to do something for him that he feels like God has never done. He never got the true blessing from his dad. Oh, he went in and stole the prayer. He went in and stole the birthright. He went in and stole it even to the degree that his dad couldn't even take it back. The spiritual power that went with that blessing was given to Jacob, but then Jacob had to flee. He's been gone 20 years. So who actually really inherited? Esau. Esau was left behind, so everything became Esau's. Esau got it all. In spite of what Jacob tried to do, Esau got it all. Everything came easy to Esau. He had it no problem. He just inherits it all. Jacob's gone, no fight, even the share that Jacob would have had is long gone because it's all mine now. And so Esau's been living high on the hog. He's been living like the king because this is what happened. Now, unbeknownst to Jacob, in the 20 years, Mom has died, but Dad didn't. Yeah, I mean, you read later, like, he'll get together with Esau, they'll have to bury their dad. It's like, what? You mean after all that, the old goat didn't die either? Right? He was blind, and he was going to go down, and we were all scrambling, trying to get the birthright before he killed, and he got up the next day and goes, oh, I'm feeling better. I think I'll go for a walk, right? And he never died. But Esau took on everything. And he doesn't even know it because, no postal service. He hasn't had word from home. His mom is gone, but Isaac's still alive. And it says in the text that he is alone. This time there's nobody to help him. There's no support structure. No, he's alone, and he's alone with this man, and they start fighting until daybreak. And it's interesting. It uses the word wrestle. But it's a weird word because it's the word in Hebrew is called abak. That's the word. And it actually means to destroy. They're not just, hey, let's have a friendly wrestling match. Oh, no. This is a knockdown, drag-out, wigs coming off fight. They're going to make it happen here. They are punching, they are hurting. The goal is to destroy the other person. That's what's happening. And they're going all night long, fighting powerfully with each other. And there is this whole thing, and it's an interesting play on words because they're at the Jabbok River. There's no J in the Hebrew alphabet. They don't have that sound. Hebrew doesn't have the sound J, J. That doesn't exist in Hebrew. So the actual name is Jabbok. And I know, well, why do we call it Jabbok? Because the Germans did the first translating, and the letter for Y in German is the letter J, and we ended up with that in the English language. So it's actually the Jabbok. It's an interesting play on words because they're having an Abak at the Jabbok, right? So you could see in Hebrew, like, yeah, I get it. They're having this war, this Abak at the Jabbok, right? And the interesting thing is the word Jabbok, which is the river is, it's a word that means like to pour out, to empty, to flow out rapidly, to beat down, to pound. That's what the name of the river is. So it's like, oh yeah, so kind of all coming together in that place, isn't it? Jacob's whole life had been a fight. And this time he's fighting God. And the fight he's having with God is this. I should curse God and die for all that has happened to me, but instead I'm going to hold on to him. I am not going to let go of this wrestling match until you bless me. The fact that he's looking for a blessing means he knows he's a little bit over his head. He wants the blessing because he knows he's with a supernatural being. Now, we might ask, well, is this a mental thing going on in his head and we're just getting this picture in the Bible? I personally believe it is both. Mentally, the torment that's going on is a wrestling match, but I believe pre-incarnate Jesus Christ actually was who was wrestling with him, God himself. Intervene. Now, to show you God's power, it's kind of funny. They're wrestling, destroying each other, like punching each other, knockdown, drag-out fight all night long until finally the angel of the Lord says, let me go. Day is coming. I'm done now. You can let me go. And he's like, I'm not going to let you go until you bless me. And then it says he touched his hip and knocked it out of socket. Like, okay, all right. Boink, and his whole hip, boom, gets completely knocked out, right? So it's like God saying, you think this has been an even match this whole time? I've been letting you win, pal. I've been letting you win so that we could have this out finally. I've been letting you vent your anger and your pain and your anguish and your suffering. But now we're coming to the place where I'm tired of letting you win. And so he knocks his hip out of socket, and Jacob still won't let go. He won't let go. And so he holds on. He says, I will not let go until you bless me. And so the Lord says, okay, I'll bless you. But first, what's your name? What is your name? And he has to say, my name is Jacob. Now, you and I are like, huh? But you see, they would understand that. Jacob, meaning he who grabs the heel. That's what the name means, because that's how he was born. It actually is a euphemism for he who trips other people up. He who trips other people up. He who deceitfully finds ways to get around other people. He who can manipulate other people. He who is an obstacle to other people. He who blocks other people. He who causes other people to trip and fall. That's what your name means. And you want God to bless that lifestyle? You want God to bless that kind of person? It's this horrible admission. It's this horrible moment where Jacob has to say, my name is he who manipulates and trips up other people. Now, will you bless me? Yeah, I don't think so. His pattern had been to fight. His pattern had been to find ways to manipulate. His pattern had been to cheat. His pattern had been at every turn, even when he made a deal, he knew how to find the loopholes to get around the deal to bless himself. He had to work his rear off for everything he had. You see, he never got the blessing from Dad. And because he never really got the affection and the blessing from Dad, he lived his life fighting to try to get his own blessing on his own terms. Some years back, there was a book written called The Blessing. And in the book, The Blessing, I actually went to church worked for a while at Scottsdale Bible Church, and both John Trent and Gary Smalley attended there. I got to meet these guys and talk to them, have some workshops from them. But in their book, The Blessing, they talk about what is the blessing? What is it that he never got from Dad that made his life brutal and difficult? And they break that down, different chapters focusing on different things. There's 5 things. Meaningful touch is one. You know, a hug, a pat on the back, the right hand, an arm around the shoulder. Meaningful touch is a powerful part of the blessing. Spoken message of love and acceptance. To hear that you are loved and you are accepted and you're cherished just because you exist, just because you're part of the family, not because of performance issues. The third is attaching a high value to the person being blessed. That there's a future sort of like being part of, that you are valuable just because of who you are. And then picturing a special future for that person, calling out of them their talents, their skills, their abilities, and who they could be, and actually opening doors of opportunity for them so that they could become the dream that they have, that what they want to be. And then an active commitment to fulfill that blessing. Those are the 5 parts of the blessing. And in the book, they'll even talk about people who did not get the blessing from their fathers end up striving and fighting and battling their whole life, trying to get the blessing from God. And sometimes failing miserably. This was Jacob's story. All he ever really wanted was to be part of the family that Dad had created, and Dad loved Esau and forgot about him. Dad championed Esau, the wild man hunter, the athlete guy, and all the stuff, the talents, the skills, and the abilities that Laban had, Dad didn't care about. It's why he didn't think twice about cheating his own father when it came time to steal the birthright and to steal the blessing. Why did he not think twice about that? That's a huge, major no-no. That's like, our equivalent would be like, that's like going into your dad's safe, grabbing the will and rewriting it just before he dies. I mean, it is a horrifically corrupt, evil, illegal thing to do. But he was willing to do that. Why? The relationship with Dad was already that broken. They already had it they'd had it out that far. He thought nothing. And plus, Mom's behind me on this, so I got her backing. And now he's trying to get the blessing from God at this point in his life. Now he needs God to give him what all of his striving, what all of his work, what all of his achievement, what all of his manipulation could not do. And the weird thing is, he was highly successful at all the work he'd done. He was so successful, he could give away 500 goats and camels and donkeys and sheep and still have plenty for himself. He was so successful at his efforts, but something was missing, and that something was the peace in his heart that he would have with God. The peace in his soul, that he got sick and tired of striving and fighting and battling, trying to find his place in the world. And everybody he dealt with, he was a fight trying to get ahead of them, one up on them. That house is how he existed. He's like, I'm sick of what I have to do to get ahead. God, I just want you to bless me. And God's like, well, what's your name? And I'll bless you. My name is Trickster. My name is Deceiver. My name is he who grabs the heel and trips other people up. God can't bless that. God can't give that the blessing. One person had said this, a commentary I read, he said, Jacob's pattern of life had to be radically changed. In saying his name, Jacob had to reveal his whole nature. Throughout Jacob's entire life, he'd been dragging God's blessing out under all circumstances for his own use, under his own steam. He was too self-willed and too proud to let the blessing be given to him. So God fights was now his name, because God turns to him in the text and he says this. He says, what is your name? He said, Jacob, verse 28. And he said, your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel. For you have struggled with God and with men, and you've prevailed. Your name is now Yisrael. Fights God. God fights. Fight God. God fights is his name. Israel means God fights. Well, does that mean you fight God, or does that mean God fights for you? Yes. It means both. He spent his whole life fighting God, but God has always fought for him. And they're having it out with each other now. So God fights was now his name. God, the real proprietor of the land, opposed his entering the promised land as Jacob. In his self-will and his own strength, he could never enter the land. The point of the story for the new nation of Israel that would come from Egypt into the land of promise is clear. Israel's ultimate victory would come not by the usual ways by which a nation gains power, but through the power of the divine blessing. Self-sufficiency is incompatible with the work of God in any age. Faith alone overcomes the world. You couldn't let Jacob come into the promised land as trickster. So he changed his name to God Fights. You are a guy who has fought with God, but you're still here. You haven't let go. You're still fighting. You didn't run away, even when you were all alone and death is coming down on you. Instead of running from God, you're still with God. And God was basically saying, I like that. I like that part of you. So I'm going to change your name to God Fights. And you and I are going to go forward in this way from here on out. And I love what happens next in this story. Look at chapter 33. He meets up with Esau. And he says this because Esau basically arrives on the scene with his 400 men, gets off of his donkey or his horse, runs over to Jacob and throws his arms around him and hugs him because he's so glad to see him. It's been 20 years and they haven't seen each other. And the interesting thing is for Esau, it's like, no, of course I'm not mad anymore. You left and I got everything. Everything came to me. I've had it easy. I've had no problem. So even though I was mad at the time and you and I would have had it out, and yeah, I would have killed you 20 years ago. But you left and I never saw you again, and mom died and life went on and you weren't here, so everything came to me anyway. So why am I'm not mad about that. Everything Dad had came to me. You walked out of here with your staff and a sack lunch and you got nothing. You didn't even get your share you should have. You got nothing. And so all these presents that you've sent me, guess what? I'm so rich I don't need them. Jacob, you keep them. I don't need your sheep and your donkeys and your goats that you sent. You hang on. And Jacob's like, no, I insist. I absolutely insist because I did you wrong. And I need to make amends for the wrong that I did. Even if you've forgiven me personally, there's something I owe you for what I did to you and what I did to Dad. I have to make amends. And so he forces Esau to keep the gifts. And I love this in chapter 33, verse 10. Jacob said, no, please, if I have now found favor in your sight, then receive my present from my hand, inasmuch as I have seen your face as though I had seen the face of God, and you were pleased with me. And I'm a little bit like, wait, red and hairy orangutan looks like God? That's not what he means when he says I've seen the face of God. What does he mean? He means I've been tormented and haunted and anguished for 20 years. I could not come back and deal with this. I couldn't send word to you. For 20 years, I thought we hated each other, and I was alienated from my own family, and I could not survive, and this thing has kept me up at nights, and I've had nightmares over it, and even coming back now, there's been nothing but anguish and terror in me because this horrible fight, this tragic thing I did wrong to you was never amended. And Esau's like, yeah, I haven't been thinking about it. Right? And that's awful. Esau's like, really? Because I haven't been thinking about it. I've been fine. I've lived life well. It's not hurt me, so I'm not mad anymore. In fact, there came a point some years down the road when I really missed you. I wished you were back. And so when he says to see your face and to see the face of God, you know what he's saying? All that pain, that anguish, that anxiety, that fear, that shame, that guilt that I've been holding on to all these years is gone, and that feels like God. I see the face of God because I've been released from it all. And he's still limping. I mean, his hip got knocked out, so he's still limping. He's not going to walk again. The next time we really see a lot of Jacob's life, at the end of his life, he's leaning on an old staff, so he may have kept this limp his whole life. The wound that God gave may have remained in him permanently as a reminder that you can't win by your own strength. You can only win by working with God. And then he settles down in Shechem, and I love this. At the end of verse 33, Esau goes back to Seir Edom. I think I have that showed on the map. It was way south. He goes back there to his own land, his own territory down there. That's where he will settle in. And Jacob will go up through Gilead. He'll cross over into the east side of the the west side of the Dead Sea, Sea of Galilee, the land we call Judea, Samaria, modern Israel now. He'll settle in there near Shechem. And when he gets over near Shechem, he buys a piece of land. And at the very end of chapter 33, it says this, verse 20. In Shechem, then he erected an altar there, and he called it El Elohe Israel. He puts up an altar in the new land where he finally plants his roots down and puts his feet, and he sets up an altar, and he calls it the God of Israel. No longer Abraham's God and Isaac's God. No longer grandpa's God, no longer dad's God, no longer the family God, no longer, oh, I grew up in church, so, everybody's always believed this. We've always been Catholic. My whole family's Catholic. Because grandpa was a Catholic, I must be a Catholic too, right? I must be a Baptist or whatever. Because he's no longer inheriting the faith of his grandpa and his dad. It's his faith. It's his relationship with God. And for the first time in his life, he sets up an altar and he says, this altar, this belongs to the God of Israel. This altar belongs to God fights. That's who gets it. And you know what's really weird? For the rest of Scripture, one of the main names of God is Holy One of Israel. Back in 32, at the end of this battle, after he gets his name, God fights, and he's about to walk out in Genesis 32. He says this, it says in what the angel does, it says, then Jacob asked, saying, this is verse 29 of chapter 32, then Jacob asked, saying, tell me your name, I pray. And he said, why is it that you ask about my name? And he blessed him there. So Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, for I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved. Just as he crossed over Penuel, the sun rose on him, and he limped on his hip. So when he sits down, he gets his new name, Israel. He says, but what's your name? And God says, you know who I am. I don't need to tell you my name. And he realizes, I have spent all night wrestling with God, and I've survived. I should have died facing God face to face, but I've survived. And he names the place where the wrestling match took Peniel. And the interesting thing is, why he doesn't share his name is, for the next 1,000 years, God's name is going to be Holy One of Israel. He will take on the name of, I am the Holy One with God fights. And the people that would come from Jacob were God fights people. And 1,000 years later, a prophet would speak, Malachi, well, actually more than 1,000 years, probably about 1,500 years later, Malachi would prophesy, and he says this interesting phrase in Malachi 1:2. I have loved you, says the Lord. Let you say, in what way have you loved us? Was not Esau Jacob's brother? See, by now, the two people groups, the ones behind Esau and the ones behind Jacob, have grown into two mighty nations, the Edomites and the Israelites. And they've been at war with each other. They have fought each other. They've hated each other. The Edomites and the Israelites have not gotten along. And the Lord says this, but Jacob I have loved. The Apostle Paul will quote this in Romans chapter 9, and he'll say, after their lives were lived, God would say, Jacob I have loved, and Esau I have hated. Which is an interesting thought. Esau, who had an easy life, didn't have anything happen wrong for him, inherited everything, life came easy to him, riches came easy, wealth came easy, and God's response is, yeah, but I hated Esau. Why did he hate Esau? Because Esau could have cared less about God. His whole life, he didn't care about God. He didn't care about the things of God. He didn't want to worship God. He despised the birthright that he had, sold it for literally a pot of beans at one point in his life. When it came to the things of God, Esau could care less. He produced the Edomites, which were a wicked, ruthless people. All of his family line would be a line that God would say, yeah, that whole family line, I hate it. You know who I loved? I loved the line of Jacob. Yeah, he had it hard. Yeah, it wasn't easy. Yeah, he screwed up. Yeah, he made mistakes. Yeah, he was a bit of a manipulator. Yeah, he used other people. But one difference was, when push came to shove, Jacob respected me, and Jacob knew I was there, and Jacob loved me. In spite of all his faults, he loved me. And the guy who had it easy never loved me. And God would say, 1,000 years after their lives were lived, Jacob I have loved, Esau I've hated. You wouldn't know it by how they lived their lives. The one who got the hardship was the one God loved. The one who had it easy, God didn't love. I look at this whole thing and I think about us. We all want the blessing. We all want that inheritance from God. We all want to enter the promised land of joy and peace and prosperity and comfort, the place where we say, I'm home. I have my spot in the world. I know where I belong. I belong here, and God is with me, and he protects me, and he preserves me, and I am in my own promised land. We're all looking for that blessing. And some of us have tried to strive and pretend and fight and battle to get it. And that striving and that battle, it never fully works. And all you can do is hang on to God at some point and have a knockdown, drag-out fight with God and get to the place where you finally say, I will not let go of you, God, until you finally fulfill your promises. It looks terrible. It looks broken. It looks lost. I'm not going to win, but I'm not going to let go of you, God, because there's one fundamental thing still operating in my soul. I believe you tell the truth. And your truth is promises. And if I haven't seen your promises, I'm going to hang on to you until I do. And that's a massive thing. Some of us have been there. We hang on to Jesus until we get the blessing, till we find the favor. If you'll indulge me, I'll just tell you one story as we end. It's by a guy named Kevin Butchner. He wrote it in our denominational article called The Covenant Companion. He says, a few years ago, I was preaching in a church in Wisconsin about the love of God. And at the end of the service, I asked a brother sitting a few rows back to join me in role-playing the beginning of Jewish Sabbath. In the beginning of Jewish Sabbath, the father traditionally speaks a blessing over each of his children. And I told the man, who looked to be in his 40s, dressed in a business casual and built like an NFL linebacker, that he would play the role of my son, and for the moment, I would be his dad. He nodded his permission, so I knelt down in front of him, placed my hand around the back of his neck, and I came close to him and began to speak a blessing. I told him how blessed I was to be his father, how I remembered so well the moment of his birth, and how I wept because God had given me a precious little boy. I told him I was proud of him then, and so very proud of him now. Not because of his accomplishments, but simply because he was himself. And I just loved him. I told him I was glad he played football, but it didn't really matter to me if he scored the winning touchdown or fumbled on the goal line. I simply was proud that he went out and tried. And I told him I loved that he was teachable, and that he loved his mother and his sisters well, and that he was compassionate. I told him I knew that it was tough in the world and he wouldn't always feel safe, but that no matter what, whether he was at the top of his game or struggling, I would always, always be there for him. All he needed to do was look over his shoulder, and as long as God gave me breath, I would be there. And then I pulled this giant of a 45-year-old man close, and I kissed him on the cheek, and I whispered, I love you, son, and I always will. As I was speaking, a peaceful stillness came over the 800 people gathered there. All that could be heard was the quiet shedding of tears of the brothers and sisters in the room, which allowed the Father's blessing to take them somewhere deep in their own hearts. But what really moved me was the response of my son. During the entire blessing, he sat with his huge arms folded across his chest, not one muscle moving or even twitching, looking me right in the eye as tears rolled down his face. After church, one of the leaders came to me and he said, I just talked to the gentleman who role-played with you, and he told me this was his first time, and he's never been to our church before. And actually, due to some religious wounds, the first church he's been in years. And then he told me something else. He said that what just happened was the most significant moment of his entire life. Were the words magic? Is it the power of suggestion that seems to so deeply impact others when we simply turn to them and in love give them what we have to offer in Jesus' name? Or could it be the fellowship of our loving God, the profound healing of power of good church to cover a multitude of sins? I can't think of a single person in our community of believers who sticks around because of the typical church stuff that attracts and holds so many followers of Christ in our culture. They come and engage because they're empty and desperate to know the healing love of God and Jesus. They are tired of just hearing about it and faking their experience of it. They want to intimately know, deeply feel, and live the rest of their lives in that love. How about you? Are you getting this? It's impossible to read, sing, study, podcast, or educate your way into experiencing the love of Jesus. Human beings simply cannot heal without the shared koinonia of God. In order to heal from the deep wounding of the enemy in our soul, we must connect with other sons and daughters of God who are done playing the game and who want to engage in emotionally, spiritually raw, naked, and unashamed fellowship. The exchange of the deep, deep love of Jesus is the only commodity in the universe that can heal us all. It is good. Why don't you stand with me? And I will give you blessing. Lord God Almighty, for the people in this room who are standing now, I ask that you tell them what you would say to them. You speak, Lord. My sons and my daughters, you do not comprehend how much I love you. I've seen you. I have watched you. I have never abandoned you. I was there in your stressful times, and I held on to you when you didn't know it was me. I've been there in your great moments of joy celebrating with you. I have such a huge destiny for each of you. I have not forgotten you, and I have not abandoned you. You are my beloved daughter. You are my beloved son. You don't have to perform for me. There's no performance you could give me that I couldn't do so much better by myself anyway. I don't need you. I want you. I love you. And I want your love in return. I want you to come to me in your secret times and your quiet times. I don't want you to let go of me. Come and fight with me. Come and wrestle with me until you find the answers I have to give you. Life will not be easy. You will feel yourself being beaten up at times. You will feel yourself disappointed. You will feel yourself frightened. But I'm going to tell you, I will never leave you or forsake you. I have you in my hands. You don't have to be afraid. You don't have to be overwhelmed. I will protect you. I will guide you. I will bless you. But I do all this on my terms, not on your terms. I don't become